Once upon a time, there was a Chinese farmer who lost a horse, ran away. And all the neighbors came round that evening and said, "That's too bad." And he said, "Maybe." The next day the horse came back and brought 7 wild horses with it. And all the neighbors came around and said, "Why, that's great, isn't it?" And he said, "Maybe." The next day his son was attempting to tame one of these horses and was riding it and was thrown and broke his leg. And all the neighbors came round in the evening and said, "Well, that's too bad, isn't it?" And the farmer said, "Maybe." And the next day the conscription officers came around looking for people for the army, and they rejected his son because he had a broken leg. And all the neighbors came round that evening and said, "Isn't that wonderful?" And he said, "Maybe." This, in a way, in a certain sense, reflects a fundamentally Taoistic attitude, which is that the whole process of nature is an integrated process of immense complexity, and it is really impossible to tell whether anything that happens in it is good or bad, because you never know what will be the consequences of a misfortune, or you never know what will be the consequences of good fortune. I know a woman who was quite happy until she inherited $2 million. And then she became absolutely miserable because she was afflicted with paranoia that everybody was going to take it away from her, especially the government. And on the other hand, you've all known cases where some sort of ridiculous inconvenience or accident preserved you from a worse one, or else it was an occasion on which you met someone you fell in love with or formed a fast friendship with. You never know what is the chain, the pattern, the connection between events. And it is for this reason that the Taoist has been critical of 2 things. 1, of words, and 2, of interference. He criticizes words because among the Confucians, who were always literary people, they had a thing going called the rectification of names. Now, so far as names are concerned, the Taoists always laughed at the idea of the rectification of names, because they said, now look, when you compile a dictionary, you define your words with other words. Now, with what other words are you going to define the words with which you define the words, so as to be sure you've got them straight? You have to have something, in order to understand words, you have to have something else. And that is a very mysterious matter, but one of the reasons why the Chinese did not go on to develop an advanced technology had to do with names, and it had to do with a certain attitude to nature. With this realization that language is a net which will never succeed in capturing the world, goes a reluctance to interfere with the processes of nature. Because what you think may be a good thing to do may be good only in the short run. It may turn out to be disastrous in the long run. To give the very simple example, the problem of population. What on earth are we going to do about that? Because in times past, perennial outbreaks of cholera and other diseases which wiped out millions of people. So the population was pruned. Now, however, with the methods of modern medicine, we begin to stamp out these plagues, but then a new plague turns up in the form of human beings. Too many of them. Well, you can't go around in cold blood getting rid of people who you regard as not making up to certain standards. It was somehow better if the cholera did it, because that was impersonal and it bore you no spite. But when human beings have to decide to get rid of each other, then there's real trouble. So a Taoist would be on the whole inclined not to interfere with the course of events, because he feels that they are of a complexity so great that he, with his verbal interpretations and of certain selection of things that we call good and a selection of certain things that we call bad, well, he feels that he doesn't really know in terms of words whether a given event is good or bad. He may feel badly about it, but he may feel that this is the proper and appropriate way to feel in such circumstances, and that it will go over. It will pass. For as Lao Tzu said, the fierce gale does not last the whole morning, nor does pelting rain go on all day. Then he goes on to say, if heaven and earth cannot keep up these things for long, how much less can mankind?